In fact, we want to pay a lot of money for it, Arnold. I want crappy, expensive American tea. The Tea Act infuriates the American colonists because it's forcing American colonists to drink British tea. Now, this kind of sounds ridiculous, right? But it's pure American at this point. We're founding America. Don't tell us what we can do. We want our own crap. I want to pay lots of money for my crappy American stuff. I don't want your high-quality foreign goods for less money. So what is the American response? The Tea Act. Remember, all of these acts are having American responses now, right? Navigation laws, Molasses Act, what's the response? Smuggling, right? Stamp Act, what's the response? Right? Virginia Resolve, Stamp Act, Congress, non-importation, right? Sons of Liberty. Towns and Acts, you have letters going around, Pennsylvania Farmer Circular letter going around, non-importation, get rid of that. Tea Act, what's our response going to be? There are actually more than just one Tea Party. There are actually parties down the coast. Charleston had their own Tea Party, but the most famous one is the Boston Tea Party. Members of Sons of Liberty dressed up like Native Americans. Many of them did. Many of them drunk. Get on the ship and toss the tea out into the sea in the Boston Harbor. I always liked the idea of thinking about what the fish were like who were absorbing all of this caffeine. Like how fast they must have been swimming around a lot, right? And ramming into each other and jumping over things, like ramming ships because they were amped on tea, and then they got dehydrated because caffeine dehydrates you, and they had little fish hangovers. They came down off their caffeine high.
You must have too much time to come up with this.
Just comes to my head. So now what's going to be the British response to the Boston Tea Party? They're not going to stand for this, by God. Remember, we're the same people who passed the Declaratory Act. We can do what we want. So they pass something called the Coercive Acts. Parliament passes the Coercive Acts. In America, in the American colonies didn't call them the Coercive Acts. They call them the Intolerable Acts because they're intolerable. What do these acts include? Well, number one, Boston Port Act. The Boston Port was closed until everything was repaid. And the Boston Port's a really important, very large port. Remember, in much of Massachusetts' economy based on trade with other places and commerce, right? It's closed. Number two, they actually revoked, the Parliament revoked the Massachusetts Charter. You're now under our control, Spankies. Number three, they once again began to enforce the Quartering Act even more. So the Quartering Act becomes part of it. And actually something that wasn't meant to actually be considered part of the Coercive Acts, but ends up being hated by the colonists, was the Quebec Act. Quebec, well, where's Quebec?
Canada.
It's in Canada. Canada. And there were a lot of French Canadians in the upper colonies, and they were Catholic. And remember, the British is obviously not Catholic, but they extended some Catholic rights. You don't have to make that face, baby. They actually extended some religious toleration to some of the Canadian Catholics, and the people in New England were like, "That's crap." But it was an anti-Catholic. This wasn't part of the Coercive Acts, but they just hated the fact that Catholics were getting some tolerance. So they thought that was part of it too. What's the ironic part about New England being anti-Catholic?
They're tolerant.
Do what?
They're more tolerant than others.
Well, maybe. Middle colonies are tolerant now. If you go to Boston, the whole joint's Catholic, right? New England is hugely Catholic now. It used to be, but it's hugely Catholic. Okay, so there we go. So what's our response to the Coercive Acts? Dun, dun, dun.
The Continental
The
Congress.
First Continental Congress. The First Continental Congress, I'm going to be drawing for you guys, and coming up, I'm going to be doing some military tactics and drawing some stuff. Now, I want to tell you something. First of all, I'm a better artist than all of you guys. But most importantly, I'm an incredible military tactician. Generals from all over the world and admirals call me every day asking me my advice on basic war tactics. I get tired of it after a while. I'm like, leave me alone, figure it out for yourself. But I'm going to draw up a battle plan for you guys and show you. Now, the First Continental Congress, one of the first things they do is, in response, they endorse something called the Suffolk Results. Now, if you're curious, by the way, when, you don't have to write this down, but it is actually kind of ironic. Do you know when the First Continental Congress started? It was in 1774. Do you know what day in 1774 it started? September 5th. Today. It started, right, 234 years ago today. The First Continental Congress started. 12 colonies showed up. Georgia didn't show up. Georgia didn't show up, but everybody else did. Why is this important? Not that Georgia didn't show up, but everybody else did. What is it about Georgia that we hate? No. Why is it that this is important?
First university. All the
Right, we have the Albany Congress, then we have 10 years later the Stamp Act Congress, and then 9 years later we have the First Continental Congress, right? We have non-importation, right? We have all these things coming together so the colonists are now beginning to organize, right? And that's what happened. The Suffolk Resolves, is the Suffolk Resolves on there? Yeah. The Suffolk Resolves, first of all, they're denouncing the Intolerable Acts. They officially denounced them as a colony, not just an individual colony, but colony-wide, right? They're denouncing them. And listen to this, because this is, as they say in Spain, importante. That means important. The colonies begin to organize militias because they feel like they might have to defend themselves. Now, they're not thinking about breaking away yet. They're thinking about defending themselves. Do you see the difference? Yes.
colonies form malicious part of the social.
Yeah, this is part of, this is Suffolk Results. This is part of the decisions they're making early on, okay? Now, some people there called on a new plan called the Galloway Plan. If you remember in 1754, not that you were alive, but learning about it, remember 247 years ago? You were a small child. By the way, with these new glasses, I like taking them on and putting them off when I make a point. I like kind of going like this, making a point, and then putting them back on. I don't know why, but I feel like I'm mature when I do that. I think the old people do that, right? Like, hold on a second. That's right. Right? I like doing that now. I've decided to do it. That's right. What'd you say? I thought so. I do it all day now. I don't know why, but I really liked it. My other glasses, it took a long time to get off. They were like stuck to my nose. The Galloway, remember the Albany Plan, they called for colonial home rule, and this was rejected by the colonists because they thought it wasn't enough power. The Galloway Plan is a similar plan for colonial home rule. Although, ironically, there were actually more conservatives at the First Continental Congress, and many of them actually said, no. We're not going that far. We don't want colonial home rule. We just want the British government, specifically the Parliament. They're still pro-king. We want the Parliament to get rid of these suppressive acts upon us. And maybe the most important thing they established was the association. The association, the Galloway Plan was rejected, but the association was an agreement amongst the colonists as a way to, not rebel, but to protest these acts. They agreed on non-importation, non-exportation, and non-consumption. We're not going to buy your crap, we're not going to sell you crap, and we ain't using your crap. Non-importation, non-exportation, and non-consumption. right, now there was also, I know this is a lot at one thing, the Declaration and Resolves. This is kind of what I was getting at, where they're calling on England. They're literally sending to England, this is what we want. Please stop with these laws. This is what they're petitioning England, right? Specifically, they're sending Britain this request. Get rid of these laws. The Declaration and Resolves. In fact, this is going to be an important part of the Declaration of Independence, right? Since you're not redressing our grievances. Please redress our grievances. What does it mean to redress a grievance?
Take it away.
Yeah, get rid of the problem, right? What do you think Britain did, the Parliament did, and the King, when they got the Declaration and Resolves?
They laughed at it.
They ignored it. Why would they, not just why would they ignore it? Why not just say, go smurf yourself? Why not even say that? Do what?
Didn't want to provoke.
That's much you don't care.
Didn't want to provoke.
If they would have responded back, wouldn't that have said that they recognized the right of the Continental Congress to even exist? Because now they're negotiating with them. No, we're not going to do this. Now you're negotiating. By ignoring them, the British are basically saying, we don't even acknowledge your right to exist. So it's ignored. All right. Now, are we coming to, yes, time for military action. Now, don't try to do what I do. It's taken years of expertise and training and education to do this. All right? Here is a long road. All right? Here, you don't draw this, by the way. You can't do it if you try. All right, here is city of Lexington. Here is a big forest. It's symbolic. Here is more forest. Here is a city called Concord. And in Concord, they have an armory that has a gun. All right? It's a really powerful gun. Like, it's what it lacks in quantity, it makes up for in quality. All right? All right. This is ridiculous drawing. I love it. All right. You said it. Shut up, Cole. I'm on tape. Cole, don't say things like that.
I'm terribly sorry, Mr. Sayer.
I don't blame
No,
you.
you're not.
All right, Brenda, shut up. Brenda Brooks is a nice woman who deserves my respect and admiration for how hard she tries in class. I would never turn off this and yell or cuss at her.
Kayla's going to enjoy this so much.
All right. Now, the British had sent some troops to Boston to try to. There were actually some colonials who were were rebelling, and they were going to arrest them. They also were wanting to get to Concord. There was an armory, and they did not want the rebels. They didn't want these revolutionaries, the militias, to get. They wanted to surround and hold the armory. You've heard of Paul Revere and William Dawes, right? When they see the British coming, they warn everybody the British is coming. Well, in Lexington, and you've heard of like our mall in Lexington called Lexington Green. Why is it called Lexington Green? Do you know why Lexington's called Lexington, by the way? When it was founded, the people who were camping in the area had just heard about the Battle of Lexington, and so named this Lexington after the Battle of Lexington because they'd heard about it. It had made its way down. Okay. So a lot of these small New England towns would have all their little farms and houses and buildings, and their farms would go out this way, and there was a big center area called the Green. Okay? Small New England towns still have this. In fact, when I did my marathon in Vermont this year, the marathon ended on the green of this small little New England, adorable little town. It was this adorable little town with little shopkeepers, right, and small little businesses and neat little houses and old colonial homes, and it was really cool, right? And it had a green, and kids would play on the green, like they would have community activities, right, and races ended on it, they started on it. It was really pretty quaint and adorable. They actually would get in a circle around the green oftentimes for protection against outsiders, traditionally from Native Americans, but from outsiders in general. Well, when the British were coming this way, hold on, let me draw my British guy.
Have you read?
I love football, and I mean soccer. All right, so now we know it's British. All right. So, by the way, NFL starts today. NFL starts today, and what was today in the cafeteria? Stuffing and peas. All right, stuffing and peas. So all the British soldiers are walking this way, and the militiamen who have been warned by Paul Revere and William Dawes are waiting for them. And the militiamen are lined up, waiting for the British. And the British come up with the several officers, right? They're outnumbering the militia officers on horseback, and there's this tense moment on the green in Lexington, and the British say, "You get out of the way," and the militiamen say, "No." "Get out of the way." "No." And no one knows who fired the first shot. There's a movie that was made called An April Morning that's happened in April. And in the movie, it was sort of about this. They sort of make it seem like it was this weird drunk American guy who fired behind a rock and everything started happening, right? But think about the implication of this. You could have thought about it then, but today, America is the strongest nation in the history of humanity, right? The militarily and economically, we are the strongest nation in the history of human beings. And it was officially started here. You don't know who started it, but theoretically speaking, this is when the country basically started thinking about independence. Now, they weren't there yet, but this got the ball really rolling. You okay? Okay. That's not what I do when I have to pee. So they actually fired. Whoever fired, and there is a small little battle. The militiamen lose. They didn't stand up to them. Several British die, some Americans die, and the British continue on towards Concord. Now, what's the time on that, Karen?
18.
Okay, 18?
Yeah.
Start to stop.